Attention, all planets of the Solar Federation. Welcome to Crapper. Tonight we have the old team back together. The percussive Potter, Sean Hall. The tuneful teacher, Peter Turner.
Mm.
And the singing sociology lecturer. That's me, Tim Appleton.
Yeah.
And tonight we'll be discussing drum roll. No.
Yeah.
2112 by Rush. Absolute classic. We'll see what we make of it. We'll try not to go on for too long, but no promises. So I thought we'd begin with general opinions of the album, like before we get into the tracks. So maybe Peter, if you'd like to start us off, how do you feel this album fits into the Rush of?
It's good evening. It's really like a sort of breaking point for them, isn't it? Because you've got I had to listen to Caress of Steel like a couple of days ago, and you realize what's happening. This is the meeting point between that kind of more sophisticated progressive rock and that sort of rootsy sort of blues rock they were doing before, and it all sort of coalesces on here, doesn't it? I think the album's fantastic. I love the album. Part one, side one. I'm an absolute fan of it. There's nothing. I can never find any fault actually with the first part. I think it's not balanced out by the second part, but I think that there's a story behind how this album happened, really, which can kind of explain that. But yeah, I'm a fan of 2112, the track, definitely.
Okay, good. Sean, do you have anything to add? Do you like this album?
Yeah, I think I'm probably the same as Peter there. I like 2112. I like the side one.
There's a theme emerging here.
A few concerns with some of the themes of the lyrics and sort of the symbolism behind it. I have slight concerns with, but side two. Side two, I'm not so much of a fan of. I think I prefer Rush. I think I prefer the proggy side of Rush, and I'm more comfortable with the fantasy lyrics side of Rush rather than getting into any sort of social comment or other direction the lyrics take. But I do think it's a good album in that it's obviously Caress of Steel, they had that hard rock sort of background, didn't they? Where they were sort of saying that do we just keep making another mini Led Zeppelin album, because I think they were sort of quite fans of Led Zeppelin, weren't they? And it is a change in direction, and I don't know if it's my favorite Yes album. Sorry, Yes, there's a Freudian slip for you.
Oh my God.
Oh. Um, I don't know if it's my favorite Rush album, but everyone's different, aren't they? So
They
yeah.
are. Geddy Lee played bass on Roundabout when
Yeah.
when Yes, well, I was going to do it again then. When Rush, when Yes, were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
whatever the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is.
Yeah.
So I think Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson and Neil Peart were big fans of Yes, weren't
Yeah, they were. They did the vocals for Farewell to Kings at was it Advision Studios, didn't they? Where Yes recorded. So,
Yeah, right.
hats off to them.
Did they have to sort of like fit their equipment in amongst all the cardboard cows or whatever? Or was that a bit
Yeah. Oh dear. Yeah.
that's a very unfunny reference to Yes, the Yes biography for anyone who knows it. Well, do you think does it matter what their politics are?
I
Uh,
think I don't think it's a political thing. I know what Sean's saying, but I think they just like the story, didn't they? They got it from a story.
mm,
Mm.
that's right, because I think Ayn Rand is, or Ayn Rand, or however you pronounce her name. She was she's best thought of, I think, for her novels, which I haven't read, I have to say. But I mean, because why would you bother? Because I think novelists can get away with more than political commentators or philosophers, as she claimed to be.
Mm.
um, yeah, I think that it doesn't really. It's not like it interrupts the album for me, even though I share your concerns. Sound like we're at a council meeting or something.
To be honest, though, it really depends how you see it, because this can be having listened to this a lot of times and then listening back interview with Crapper, it kind of made me think you can kind of see this either way anyway. The lyrics can be seen either way. I don't really understand. Really, there is no one way of seeing actually what happens in that sequence of songs. I think there's a number of ways of interpreting it anyway.
True, although well, we're going to come back to this in a minute, I suppose. But the naked man fighting the red star on the cover is a bit of a giveaway.
Yeah, and I mean the priests do tend to sing in that sort of shouty, high-pitched Geddy Lee singing style, don't they? And the Starman has a much more sympathetic tone, doesn't he? Rather than up to the point where he dies of boredom at the end.
Yeah.
Geddy Lee sings like Steve Marriott, he said himself in his autobiography. And actually, I think his voice is Geddy Lee's voice is for a lot of people is quite difficult to take. I like it a lot because I think it's so dynamic. But he said that he thought that the best comparison for him with his voice, regarding his voice, was with Steve Marriott from the Small Faces, which actually kind of makes sense. They do sound slightly similar.
I always thought he sounded like if Robert Plant and John Anderson had sex, he would be the product. Sorry,
when Geddy Lee sings, it sounds like John Anderson and Robert Plant having sex. That's a great start, isn't it?
Oh dear.
Good. Well, I mean, I think I've got quite a few notes here. I don't know where to begin. I think I love Rush. Always have. We talk sometimes on this channel about how these sort of these things you discover when you're a teenager that stay with you through your whole life. I mean, I discovered Rush very as a teenager, and I sort of fell in love with their music. But I've never been a big fan of this album. I sort of prefaced that comment with something positive because I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. And I think that there might be sort of reasons for that. Well, there's obviously reasons for it, but I mean, like reasons that I can actually expand on, let's say. The first thing to say actually has already been alluded to, which is that this is a break from Caress of Steel. This is because Caress of Steel was a terrible commercial and critical disappointment, I think. People stopped going to see them live and stuff like that. Didn't sell very well in comparison to Fly By Night, the one before. And so this is a well-known story. They thought they'd reached the end of the road here. And 2112 was supposed to basically be, well, this is our last shot, But I think, that their record company had lost confidence in them. That was another thing. But I think that really it shows, for better or for worse in this album, that sort of mindset. Because I think that on the one hand, it feels like a very focused album. The production's pretty good, I think. We can talk more about this later on if you like. But on the other hand, I think it's I prefer Caress of Steel as a record, and it's easy to say that with hindsight, but I think Caress of Steel is sort of prettier and the dynamics are more interesting. and this album is much more serious. I think it's like they're angry on this album. And you can sort of tell it's obviously motivated them, but on the other hand, I think it's a more slightly more monotonous album, I find, than Caress of Steel. They seem to just do this very alternate between this very loud, sort of rocky, thematically dark music, and then just pure pastoral music played on the guitar. Just Alex Lifeson playing on softly on the guitar. And in particular, I think this is a problem in the first track because they just keep moving between these two modes. So I always find it a bit more of a, as I say, a one-note album. This, and not to mention, of course, as has already been discussed, the thematic question. I don't like the story particularly. I'm not a big sci-fi fan, I have to say, right? So someone finds a guitar. I mean, it doesn't really seem to me like maybe a big enough story to hang all of this on. Also, by the way, isn't it the plot of We Will Rock You the musical by Queen and Ben Elton?
Yeah. Then there's no forgiving it.
And I think I would say one final thing about the words and the theme of the album, or let's say at least the theme of the first half, which is that whilst I think that, music is not political, so it doesn't really matter too much, even though we might disagree with Rush's political opinions, you can kind of put that to one side a bit if you're listening to your favorite band, rocking out. But on the other hand, I think it is rather negative, isn't it? They're obviously it feels like they're having a go at the record company. We will prevail, against the machine of the record company. Sort of thing. And so I think that's kind of, that colors the theme of the first half, and it makes it kind of a bit of a sort of whinge. Sounds like a bit of a whinge to me. And it's a sort of, I suppose it's like it's a bit like it's a classic sort of sci-fi reference to Plato, I suppose, in the Republic, where poetry is circumscribed and certain kinds of music are circumscribed because they make people have feelings that they're not conducive to the social good, and also that, of course, there's the Ayn Rand reference, which is not a problem necessarily in itself, but it has to do with that, that kind of resentful negativity that I feel kind of pervades the album, both musically and lyrically. Ayn Rand is she's a sort of right-wing ideologue, really, when it comes to her theoretical writing. She claims to be a philosopher, but her philosophy is just drivel. As far as I can tell. I mean, I've read some essays by her, and it's just nonsense. It's like philosophy written by somebody who's never actually read any philosophers.
A couple of things, though, worth noting about her is, and Rush as well, which is I had listened to Moving Pictures, which is the album after the live album that came after 2112, and they kind of completely throw away this idea, because in that song Witch Hunt, it just came up suddenly, the lyric, which is those who know what's best for us must rise up and save us from ourselves. And I thought that's like the absolute opposite of what you said on 2112, which is, the big people at the top should actually, save us. We're just idiots, that kind of thing, which I thought was, a bit different. Also, of course, Ayn Rand is sort of credited with the rise of Silicon Valley. They kind of embraced her philosophy, didn't they? This utopia, whereby the world could organize itself. People just needed to talk. Who needs leaders? When you've got, of course, that didn't turn out like that at all. But she was pretty central to their thinking as well, which is a bit worrying. It's kind of current, isn't it? She's current now, really.
Yeah.
I mean, she's popular with the new right, isn't she, or the alt right, or whatever they're called in America. And I think that sort of that kind of resentfulness, I think, kind of pervades the album for me, the story and the album. And I think, as I say, the music feels almost defensive, if for want of a better word. Should we go to Turner's Turntable?
Yeah.
Hey.
Before we do Turner's Turntable, I was just going to say about you saying, they this was the breakthrough. They had one more chance. What's really interesting is when you talk about Caress of Steel. When I listen to it, I think that the short tracks are really good on Caress of Steel. I wonder whether what the reason why the audience dropped off is because of the Fountain of Lamnath. I want and the
Mm,
Necromancer.
mm,
I think that might be the
mm,
reason why. So actually, in a sense, they did something even braver here, didn't they? Which was to think, to hell with it. We're going to do
mm,
a 20-minute rock opera, whether they like it or not.
mm,
Even though the evidence was probably clear that they preferred the shorter stuff, they did it anyway.
mm,
They just went ahead and did it, which I think is remarkably brave.
Yeah,
mm,
yeah, no, absolutely, it is. You'd think like, oh, what's the last thing you'd do if you just had an album with a 20-minute epic on that hadn't sold?
Yeah,
Like, we need you to kind of change direction, lads.
yeah,
All right, well, let's give us a while. We'll see what we come up with, and then you do exactly the same thing again. Um,
mm.
yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Do you want to hear some facts?
throw some facts at
Yes,
us,
please.
Peter.
Okay. Well, 2112's worth remembering that it's actually pronounced like that, of course, because so you have other albums with numbers, don't you? And they're not called this. It's 2112. Then it's the sort of vision of the future, and I think partly based on the 1812 idea, isn't it? Because they have the 1812. Is it Tchaikovsky?
Yep.
Um,
Tchaikovsky.
tune in there as well. It's the fourth album by Rush, released in March 1976 on Mercury Records. It was big in Canada, which you can imagine because they're from Canada, number five, and became basically their first commercial breakthrough. It hadn't really done much, but it only reached number 61 apparently, like over here.
Mm,
It wasn't so great here, but not so great. Yeah, that like you said, they were in financial hardship. And the tour for Caress of Steel was terrible. So basically, their manager apparently begged, actually said, give us one more chance, pretty much, and they went and did it, and it was their biggest hit, to date. After that, favorable reviews, music critics really liked it, outsold all the other albums very quickly, and then they went on and did a really long tour with 1976,
mm.
77, which you can hear on the album after, some of that stuff anyway. Is it All the World's a Stage? Is that the one? Yeah, I think it is.
I think so.
It Moving Pictures did take over from that, which sold far more actually. 3 million, I think. 3 million copies that sold. Interesting. I always check Spotify stats as well for this, which is they've got 3.6 million listeners, which is not that much actually. I'm surprised it wasn't more than that. Because you sort of see the grades of things, don't you, through bands, and sometimes you're amazed how many, sometimes not. Um, I think that's about it really on the facts there. What I like is that palindromic thing, 2112. I
Mm.
quite like that, but I don't think that's why they chose it, did they?
Well, I think that they do a musical. I mean, we're getting into the tracks here, really,
Mm,
but they do a musical reference to the 1812 overtures, don't they? At the end of the 2112 overture, which is a great musical
yeah,
joke.
yeah.
And because it's a musical joke, I suspect it was dreamed up by Alex Lifeson because he was the Joker of the pack.
He is. He's quite funny, actually, isn't he?
Yeah. Um, but it did make me wonder. I mean, it's great that bit because also like he's playing in a major key. He's playing that theme in a major key, and of course the rest of the band are playing in a minor key.
Yeah.
So that sort of makes it funnier, the musical joke. But it did make me wonder actually whether to what extent this whole album was influenced by Tchaikovsky, as you said, because did they just take the name 2112 from 1812, which was an important year in history, and then I mean, at what point did the joke, like because this could be a reference to a war, like the 1812 overture
Yeah.
was, which is between Russia and France, just in case anyone had forgotten.
But also, there's that Queen thing as well, isn't there? If you listen to A Day at the Races, which is 75, possibly about the same time as this, you've got
Uh,
Brian May doing a lot of this classical stuff, haven't you? And suddenly they stick that. It sounds a bit like the sort of thing Queen would
Mm.
do, actually.
yes, I mean the other thing I wondered about was whether the um, the palindrome, as you said, the palindromic thing, whether that was actually a reference to George Orwell, because famously 1984 was written in 1948.
Ah,
Mm,
So I
yeah.
wonder whether they had that in their minds when they were,
yeah,
you know,
that's an idea.
whether it was in the mix, because it's also, 1984 is about a totalitarian society. So
Yeah.
um, anyway, brilliant. Well, look,
Very good.
before we get into the tracks specifically, should we just talk? I mean, I hate to say this, but should we talk about the cover a little bit? Should we go for Hall's
Yeah.
Gallery?
Yeah, Peter's got it. I've got it. Yeah.
Oh,
Should I just tell you what well,
Hmm.
it's it's designed by Hugh Syme, who was a musician and designer. And he basically actually your camera's probably better, Peter, if you do you want to hold yours up? I'm bathed in this sort of green undersea light here
yeah.
in my daughter's room. Um, so he was a designer and musician. I think he dabbled with some of the synth sounds, did he, on the start of 2112? So, yeah, the best I can say is it's very legible font on the front. To me, this looks of its era. It looks, this is my personal opinion. Um, it looks sort of like a bit glam rock in
Yeah.
my estimation. I mean, obviously he was a pretty well-known guy. There's the sort of the Starman logo underwater, so I don't know if that's a reference to the water sounds on the Temples of Syrinx. And there you've got the naked. To me that looks satanic. Actually, I don't know. So I'm not heavily into Satanism these days. But there you go. So the Starman's naked, and we've got this sort of computer circuit board. So there's Peter alluding to Silicon Valley. Um, there's some sort of awful portraits of the three members of the band, but at least, you know, it tells you who they are. Alex Leifson, I mean, what is he wearing? I mean, for God's sake. But anyway, at least you can see who they are. I'm basically saying this is incredibly dated.
Mm.
You've got all the lyrics, and you've got some notes about the lyrics as well, in this sort of red font. And then the back cover is sort of like the Bee
Is
Gees.
it, by the way, sorry, is it legible? Because Peter will get very cross if it's not.
Well, I struggle to read it, but then my eyesight's terrible. But if you're about 16, I think you could probably read.
To
You'd
be
be
honest,
reading
though,
that, wouldn't you? Reading,
red on
yeah.
black is almost impossible to read.
You'd you'd be lapping up that stuff about the priests in the Temple of Syrinx, and then there's this awful picture of them in sort of ABBA satin suits, really, sort of
I
a bit.
I always think that Neil Peart
Um,
looks like Alex and Geddy's pimp.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. He's obviously Hugh Simon. He's done a lot of album covers. He's done Iron Maiden. So Tim, probably you're all over that. He's done Def Leppard, White Snake, Megadeth, Bad English. And then we get into Celine Dion. So he's done the names, hasn't he? Dave Edmunds, of course. Coverdale Page. I had that one. And Charlotte Church. So he's not been short of work over the years. But it's interesting that I think when they reissued this, they changed the cover, didn't they? I
Did he
think they did.
do? Did he do the
Well,
cover of that? What was that woman who won Stars in the Rise? That pub singer. I've forgotten her name now.
Gina Easton. No, we go back too far.
Never mind.
Oh,
Sorry.
I know the one with the. She looked like a hobbit, didn't she?
That's right. What was her name?
I can't remember. Susan Boyle.
Susan Boyle. Yeah, yeah. But now,
Kubo.
now it's too late for the joke to have worked.
So that's oh, he said that the Starman and the logo was it was man against collectivist mentality, and I think the star was meant to be the symbol of the Solar Federation. It's all a
Yeah.
bit Blake Seven, isn't it? I always think.
The thing is,
Um,
ultimately, this album cover does not is one of those ones that has not aged well
yeah,
at all. There's
yeah,
nothing about this album cover that makes you think, oh, this is a classic cover. It's so in its time, and the
yeah.
back cover is just so dated. They
Mm,
look, I mean, Geddy Lee looks sort of like disinterested, actually. He doesn't even look like he's
yeah,
posing for the
yeah.
photograph.
I
But
know.
how they got him into those, I mean,
Um,
it just goes to show fashion
it,
change.
it's as we're in Hall's gallery. Can I show you my picture of Neil Peart that I drew?
Ah, yeah,
It's brilliant.
Sorry, I
good.
took it like that.
Was that
Yeah.
other window on the other page?
No,
Let's not
no,
go into
it's
it.
not. It's not.
That's
That's
that's that's
yeah,
excellent.
nice,
That
nice
is
little. There you
excellent.
go. There you go, listeners.
He looks like a troubadour there.
He does. He's great though, isn't he, Neil Peart?
Mm.
Yeah. So that's it.
I wonder whether, yeah, I mean, it looks that they, uh, I mean, that photo session. What was going on that day? Do you think? Because
Cheap.
Do you
there's a
think that? Sorry, Tim, I've interrupted you. Do you think they'd been hanging around too much in Bangkok and come home with a few items?
well,
Kimono.
what I was going to say was it looks like when Gilbert and Sullivan. You're going to wonder where I'm going with this, aren't you? Gilbert and Sullivan, they had a career crisis as well, much like Rush. And people they sort of stopped going to their concerts and things, and people had accused them of repeating themselves and getting boring. And so they suddenly decided to write a musical, not a musical, like an operetta, isn't it? It's called about Japan, called The Mikado.
Mm.
Mhm.
And so the whole aesthetic was Japanese, like which I think was a Victorian thing. Like they suddenly
Yeah,
interested in.
yeah.
It looks like the Mikado, like the one they're going to be sort of
Yeah.
like, with their hair all up, dyed black or something.
I think that's just the fashion. They're not dressing for that album cover, are they? They could have made a better job of it by sort of thinking like, like Floyd did with The Wall. They kind of dressed right, didn't they? There's no relationship to the album at all, what
No,
they're doing on the back. Nothing.
Yeah.
no.
Good. Well, I think we've exhausted that topic. Let's go on to something equally as insignificant. Let's get straight into the track, shall we? I thought we'd split up the 20-minute epic. The phenomenon of the 20-minute epic is an interesting one, isn't it? Only certain bands could pull it off.
Yeah.
I thought we'd split it up into its component parts.
Yeah.
So perhaps we could begin with the overture. I mean, the first thing I wanted to say about the overture, there's a bit in there's a bit that made me laugh in the American version of The Office, which you two won't know because you don't watch American telly. But there's a bit where the whole office goes to see a musical. I think it's a Sondheim musical or something. And then when they start to play the bands. One guy's like talking to the other one, and he says, and the other guy says, "Can you shut up? Because if we don't listen to the overture, we won't recognize the themes when they come back in." And that was really my point: is that I don't recognize any of the themes in this overture from the rest of the piece. So it's almost like they, I think there's one or two bits in there, but I mean, you'd have a job picking them out. They might as well have just played anything for 4 minutes. Anyway, that's my rather negative opening remark. Peter, what's your feeling on do you like the overture?
I love the overture. I think it's really clever. I've always found it clever when bands manage to do that without sort of breaking like obviously from one rhythm to another or something. I think they sew it together really nicely. The whole thing is great. There's a dramatic start. I love the overture. I think it's great, and I think it only works in retrospect. And when you play it second time, you think, oh yeah, that's the bit where that happens. So I sort of disagree. I think that it's all there. They've just sewed it together really nicely. I really like it, and the big explosion at the end. It sounds like rubble falling down before, and the meek shall inherit the earth, which doesn't happen on this album. Although we'll talk about that at the end, I guess. But yeah, no, I love it. I love the overture. I think it works really well.
Why do you say it doesn't happen on this album? You're saying because it's an ironic reference to the Sermon on the Mount, isn't it?
No.
Are you saying
Yeah.
that that's not part of the theme here?
what I'm saying is the end of this track, 2112, the end of side A is up for grabs. There's no actual certainty in the story, I don't think.
There's no real reason why they're referencing
No.
the Sermon on the Mount here, is there?
No.
I suppose that's what you're saying. I don't. It is nice though. That bit it sounds good.
Yeah. Unless do you think it's sort of it's sung ironically, like you don't get something for nothing if nobody's going to hand you out a fish or a loaf, are they?
I,
Not anymore. You've got to go and mill that flour.
fish,
That sort of
fish that trout.
fish that trout. At the end of it, he should have sung "Everyone for themselves." That would have made more sense.
Yeah.
That's the from the unedited version of the Sermon on the Mount.
Oh,
I can't believe I'm going to ask this question, but yeah, Shaun, are you a fan of the Overture 21?
Well, actually, it's very exciting. It does set the story of the planet of Megadon. I feel like I'm there on the planet Megadon in the year 2112 after the intergalactic war. It gives you that sort of spacey feel with that introduction on the synthesizers. Our friend Hugh Syme, who did the terrible artwork on the cover. But he's had an amazing career, so I'm not knocking him. But yeah, it's very exciting. I like the drum fills, which are all quite spectacular and exciting, and and the obviously the 1812 overture riff. I think I think it's exciting. Yeah, it's good.
I think Megadon, is that what it's called?
Megadon.
Wasn't that what,
Megadon.
Peter? Wasn't that what was that what you used your nickname for Lakeside Shopping Centre in Essex? When we
I don't know. It might be Megadome.
Megadome.
Yeah, easy mistake.
Funny actually, because Lakeside is a reference, another Rush reference.
Yeah,
Beautiful song, that one.
Maybe they were thinking of that when that shopping centre in Essex when they were writing Press of Steel.
Yeah, probably.
Good. I mean, I think it's quite fun, isn't it? This overture. That's what I would say about it. Yeah, I think it's quite. Again, as I say, I think that the range of their dynamics has been narrowed on this album, and to me, this sounds very heavy metal. This is their first album where I think, oh, this is like a heavy metal album. This almost like seems to be a preface to a prologue to to Norbum, that famous initialism. I would say acronym, but Norbum's not an acronym for anything. So it sounds, you can sort of, and they were even using those Iron Maiden chords quite a lot, B minor, G, A, which are the chords that Iron Maiden use almost in every track. So it's sort of harmonically, it sounds like early Norbum.
Yeah.
Me, this track.
Do people in America know what that is?
Norbum.
Not Norbum. Should we explain?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the important people will know. Everyone else can start off.
Yeah.
So Saxon, Judas Priest.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Maiden.
That's right. Yeah. So then we go into Temples of Syrinx. He's gone really Steve Marriott here, hasn't he? There's a lot of screaming.
Yeah.
I think that this is a very nice track, but I do think I have one of my structural complaints here, which is that when it goes from the overture into the Temples of Syrinx, it sounds great, it sounds sublime, but after they get to the end of the first chorus, then they go back into the verse chorus sequence, and I think they should have done something in the middle, because I think it seems to end, what's the word? Precipitously, is that the word? Like it ends too soon, this track. When he goes da 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 da, you think I always feel a bit shortchanged. Like they should have And I think the way they could have fixed that was by putting something in the middle of the track, so that the track itself worked, rather than sounding like a transitional piece between two other bits that were not especially significant. So that's my rather pedantic remark, but it's a very bracing track. Peter, do you like this track?
I just think that basically the greatness in all this, and you can really hear it, and here's just the quality of the writing. I think it's just exciting. The arrangements are exciting, whether or not their structure is wrong. Everything about it just sounds like they're not quite getting into the prog thing yet, but they are expanding upon the rock thing. It's an exciting and accessible sound, isn't it? It's for rock fans who take things seriously. Finally, Geddy's voice just sounds amazing. I mean, he sounds fantastic on this album, doesn't he? Generally. And the bass part on this is just great. It's like he's playing two walking, the "We Are the Priests in the Temple," the sort of chorus bit. It's amazing bass playing on that. Just so much going on in there. And I love the sound of bass in any rock, really. And that's what I really like about Rush, is that it's so dominant, the bass sound, isn't it? It's always there. And live, really you can hear it. So no, I really love this bit. Yeah, I love it.
But to be fair, imagine if it wasn't dominant. I mean, they sound like the White Stripes.
Yeah, but not all three pieces have dominant bass players.
True. Yeah. But I mean, Cream, Motorhead. I mean, if the bass player is absent in a three-piece, then you're in trouble, aren't you?
Very true.
Depends what you're doing. Not all bands have been like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, I'm going to mention the Blues here because nod because they're often seen as insignificant. Actually, they kind of play underneath. They might get a little solo, but you don't really hear them very much.
Sting, can we have a mention for Sting?
Yeah,
three-piece.
Yeah.
It gets really yeah. What's your point? So, Shaun, do you enjoy the track? It's got a great drum.
I like it. I think his voice for the priests is very screechy, isn't it? They sound like a real sort of rum bunch, don't they? But I find myself actually agreeing with some of their message, because they sing at one point, "Look around the world we made, equality, our stock in trade. Come and join the brotherhood of man." Well, that was in Jeremy Corbyn's 2019 manifesto, I'm sure. But it does start to make you think, oh, it's not so bad, as long as you give up music, you might get a council house or, free
Don't you
health.
find this is the odd thing about this album, is you're on both sides, aren't you?
Yeah.
Against the temple,
Yeah.
people, the priest, but actually both sides have perfectly good arguments. This is why I feel like we're supposed to be siding here, but I don't know whose side I'm on.
I'm joking.
So, Shaun, is your argument that the priests, they're very serious, a serious bunch, but
yeah,
they make the trains run on time.
Yeah, but it'd all be very bland, wouldn't it? It'd be very Stalinist, very grey, and it'd be miserable. But at least you could eat. There would be that. But I just find it's a funny sort of track, because you do find yourself singing to it. "We are the priests of the Temple of Syrinx," and you got your headphones on and you sound a right idiot, don't you, singing it? It always makes me laugh.
Yeah, it's a classical dilemma, isn't it? That philosophical dilemma. Who's right? Is it the philosopher kings, or is it the common man? And then it gets more complicated than that. But yeah.
But there's also the issue of postcodes, of course, which is Syrinx is SY or SX. They never clear that up.
That is a real structural problem on the album. That isn't cleared up. The
Postal address
issue. Right, good. Well, let's move on to the next track, which is Discovery, right? Now, my question here is called Discovery because he discovers the guitar, right? Which is supposed to liberate people.
Yeah.
And I want to know whether they use the same sound effect at the beginning as Rick Wakeman uses on No Earthly Connection, because it's supposed to sound like what the river,
Waterfall.
the waterfall. That's right.
Yeah.
But actually, it just sounds like a toilet refilling.
Urinal.
And I wonder if they'd use the same sound effect.
Perhaps they nipped off to the bogs to record it. Use time.
Also, I quite like this track. I mean, it's a weird thing to say, but kudos for the correct tune up, because they tune it up correctly. So they do a better job than, for example, 10cc on The Worst Band in the World, who do a tune up section, tune up, and they don't quite tune it up enough. So when the guitar comes in, it's slightly out of tune. That was probably to do with studio time pressures. But it all sort of works this bit, doesn't it? And it's weird. You find yourself sitting through this whole sort of like dramatic scenario that involves someone finding a guitar in a cave, tuning it up, and then playing a sort of like a really funky riff.
All in about 2 minutes.
Do you like this one, Peter?
Yeah, the thing is, Rush always have this, don't they? This moment of tranquility. I always think of it as a sort of Geddy Lee thing. I don't know why, because he's not playing the guitar, but they have these sort of romantic passages, don't they, of sort of guitar and voice. They always have this somewhere on the album. I think that there's an honesty, isn't there, to Rush, which is they're never snooty about their lyrics. It's so clear what's going on in this. They're not trying to be philosophical, despite the fact that it comes from a kind of, perspective. They just want to tell you the story, and they want you to understand the story, and there's a real honesty to that. And that's why I like them, I think, as people, because they're just not, up their own asses at all, are they? What's nice as well is they dare to actually delay this tuning, don't they? They play it a bit, goes a bit wrong. But they're not rushing. They're not rushing into it. They want it to sound real, this moment, So I think it's really nice. I like the tune. I like the way they anticipate the tune. He plays a chord and then he tunes up a little bit and it goes into it. I think it's really nice. And the way it bursts into the next track is just glorious. But Alex Lifeson said apparently that the when he plays the chords, when it picks up the speed, dun, 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 that bit, he says that's basically taken from Tommy. The guitar strumming in Tommy, he said it's no coincidence that it sounds like that, because that's what I was trying to do. Yeah.
These things, it's very, this is proper program music, isn't it? It's very narratively driven. I mean, none of these elements in this whole track would work in any other context. It's raining, or, there's a waterfall or whatever, and someone's found a guitar. It's like they've really sort of like sketched out this story very carefully, haven't they? Actually, it quite works surprisingly well, I think. Shaun, what do you think?
Well, I'm obviously a visual person, and I do like this piece. I just can't unhear or unsee a mental image of the late great George Formby in place of the stuff. Because it's so random, isn't it? Finding a guitar. I mean, it could have been a bloody ukulele, couldn't it? Or a swanee whistle or something, but it just happens to be a guitar. But yeah, I just have this vivid image of George Formby picking up a banjo and learning to play it, playing some, I don't know, Fan Like Fanny or something, But yeah, it's. I like it. It's a nice lull moment, isn't it, in the piece? And Peter's right; it does lead into the next section and blast your eardrums. Yeah, but great.
Just to be clear, sorry, George Formby played a banjolele. It was a hybrid of a ukulele and a banjo. So can we get that right in the future?
Yeah, well, we're going to get a lot of complaints in the comments, aren't we? About it? So,
yeah.
Actually, that'll probably be the least of our worries on this one. So,
there's a bit at the end where he says, I take your point about the instrument. Could have been anything. Could it? Jew's harp. That wouldn't have worked at all, would it? there's a bit at the end where when he says, "Let them all make their own music," and all that when it sort of picks up the end. Then he says, "The priests praise my name on this night," and I can't work out what he's saying. I can't work out how that fits into the story. I wondered. My technical question here is when he says praise, is that the indicative or the subjunctive mood? That's the note that I've made here. because if it's indicative, it doesn't seem to make any sense within the story, unless he's being sort of like rhetorical with it.
Perhaps it's like Britain's Got Talent, and they've given him the 3 yeses or whatever it is.
I don't think he could resolve it as a lyric, that, because I've got it in front of me. The priest praise my name on this night. What he wants to say is the priest will, and it doesn't. They can't quite fit in what they're trying to say, mate. I don't know. Is it Neil Peart? Neil Peart doing all that?
Yeah. Would have presumed so.
Right? There are some dodgy lines in this track, I think. I can see the logic of Rush. Now I have to be careful here. Two musicians, very good musicians, Alex and Geddy, and they're sort of writing this interesting music, and like the drummer doesn't really have much to contribute to that. So he's a very sort of wordy person, Neil Peart. So so we'll get him to write the lyrics, and I think his lyrics are all right, but he's not my favorite lyricist, and sometimes it lapses into cliche, doesn't it?
He has, though, on certain albums he's come out with classic lines. I mean, like really good sort of poetic lines, but they're few and far between, I think.
I was just going to say, I don't know if this is true or not, but Neil Peart said that he would obviously come up with the lyrics and they would work the music around his lyrics, so that he said, like drummers will turn up and won't know where they are in the song. He said that always helped him because he'd written the bloody words, hadn't he? So he knew exactly what was going on. But I don't know. Do you think that's true? Or do you think that's just
50-50?
So 50-50.
There's no way that they would just write around his words, because they what they do is they take his words and tweak them to fit what they've written.
You think you've got a certain number of syllables in a line, haven't you? It's not that difficult to fit lines in that make sense in the context. You just have to work with them a bit. I mean, probably some of this is to do with like them just not not bothering, like having the time to sort of work through it, which is often the case. You tend to assume, looking back, that they had loads of time to do all this. Actually, he was probably doing everything really fast. I just like to say that because you have to be careful on these things. I'm not slagging Neil Peart, and I as a lyricist, and I also obviously he's gone now, so don't speak ill of the dead or whatever. But I think his lyrics work okay for Rush, but I think that sometimes they're a little bit hackneyed, I would say, for my taste. There you are. I mean, going on to the next track, for example, where he says, "Don't annoy us further."
Yeah.
That is not a poetic line in my view, but yeah. So the next track is Presentation, which is where he presents the guitar. I mean, I get lost in stuff. I don't even care that much about the story, so I get lost. But he's presenting the guitar to the.
Yeah.
I always think of the priests as being like, in Planet of the Apes, the original Planet of the Apes, where they had the council, and some of the apes had slightly lighter beards.
mutton chops.
Mutton chops. That's right. Yeah, I always imagine like Planet of the Apes when I'm imagining the priests and him going to the priests. So yeah, he's presenting the guitar to the priests, and they're not happy about it. It's quite a funky track. This one, I think. Listen to my music. That bit is nice, I think. Peter, do you like this track?
Yeah, I know. It's the same question, but I love the whole of 2012. 2012. I love the Olympics. No, 2112. I absolutely love 2112. And what I love about this is Geddy Lee's vocals are so affecting, I find. I really like his singing, and what this displays is the diversity of his range. It's heartbreakingly soft, isn't it? The man who comes to show the guitar, he's kind of, yeah, I feel so sorry. I really feel for him every time I hear it. I feel like,
Mm.
oh, this guy, poor guy, had no idea, did he? Had no idea at all. And then Geddy's voice shifts into this octaves higher, just
Mm.
screaming at him. It's so well done, I think. Both parts superb. Um, I really like it, and also what I like is it has the part that he sings, the guy who's presenting the guitar. Do we have a name for him? I don't know, but it goes back to the discovery bit, which is
Mm.
he sung there, re-emerges in this bit, which I didn't notice actually at first, and so it's sort of written as one track almost.
Mm.
The other thing is we hear about the elder race of man. This is the first time when we hear about there's something else going on,
Mm.
outside of this planet or something. There's people, and we hear about the elder race of man, don't we, later on? But it sort of
Mm.
introduces this other thing, which is actually important in the end. That they're coming back to save us or something. I
Mm.
love this. I think it's great.
I think I take your point about it being it feels like two parts of the same track, doesn't it? Discovery and presentation, actually.
Yeah.
Um, Shaun, do you like this piece?
Yeah, I like this. I mean, it's like a call and response sort of thing, and obviously the priests all sound pretty pissed off, don't? He's the star man, isn't it? He's the protagonist. He's
Oh,
sort of saying, I know it's most unusual. Yes, we know it's just a waste of time, and as Tim said, don't annoy us further. They're sort of like angry parents or something. Where the child's been to violin lessons or something. But no, I do like it.
You could imagine they could say something like, I don't know, we shall not hear you further." That would be more poetic.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
annoy us further. It barely even scans.
Don't annoy
Sorry,
us further.
I'm
I'm
really having a
getting
go at Neil now.
I'm getting mildly irked. So give it a rest.
do not irk us further.
Um, I think, okay, I'm going to make another pedantic structural point here. I think that when it changes time at the end, it speeds up, doesn't it? Suddenly, they go into sort of like a jam section almost.
Yeah.
And I think that's meandering that bit. Like there's no point to that bit. What that should be is them coming out of the previous section, and then they should go into something else. So I feel like they should have developed that bit rather than just blowing for a while and then just stopping. I suppose, although now I've said that, I made a note of that, but that actually now I think about it, I think if you see it more how you were seeing it, Peter, as two parts of the same track, actually that bit doesn't sort of make sense as a coda section to that bit. But I think that I had the feeling that really it was the piece was losing momentum a bit at that point, but you're not going to agree.
To be honest, though, this is not prog rock in the style that we're used to. The 20-minute tracks is not like a long Jethro Tull track or Close to the Edge or something, is it? It doesn't justify itself in the same way. This is scenes from a story, isn't it? So things do actually come to a complete stop, don't they? And then you go into the next track, a quiet guitar fades in. It's not seamless. These parts can be played, and when they play it live, of course, they don't even play like the next part, the Oracle. They don't even put that in to the live bit because you can just glue bits together. It doesn't seem to matter.
Mm.
Actually, that's funny because I hadn't listened to the live one because as I've made clear before on this podcast, I don't listen to live albums generally, but I actually I've written down here when we get to the next bit, Oracle. Do we need this bit? So that's funny. They obviously concluded that they didn't. I mean, because part of the problem I have with the meandering end to the previous track is that they stop, as you said, because you're right, it's episodic, right? It's what do they call it? Is it called a picaresque, like that literary form, like Alice in Wonderland, where it just goes from one thing to another. But like they sort of stop and then they go into this sort of another pastoral bit, and it's and then they do the same again in Soliloquy. Can you justify that by just saying, well, it's episodic, or does there need to be some sense of the totality here? Because I think that the whole track would have been better. Obviously, now I've moved on to the next track, Oracle. I think the whole piece would have worked better almost if they'd just taken this out. I've written a list of reasons why, if you want to hear it.
Is this Tim's pedantry corner?
I think there's been about 3 of those so far. Doesn't really further the story, damages the overall structure, only lasts 2 minutes. And this track is, as a whole, is 20 minutes and 30 seconds or something. So they could have lost 2 minutes and it would have been Hemispheres length, which would have been perfectly fine. Hemispheres, by the way, is my favorite Rush album, but anyway, that's for another day. And also the other thing was that it contains the line "fitful sleep," which I thought was a terrible cliche.
The thing is, so you're saying this doesn't forward the story. It totally forwards the story. This is the Oracle is part of the story.
The problem is I've forgotten what the story is.
No, it totally does, because what we do is we learn about the elder race of man, what they did. They've flown away to another planet to establish a world where people can be free, and they're going to come back and rescue us. It's completely relevant, this part. And I have to say, in a way, it's sort of the highlight for me. I love this part of the track. I'm a huge fan of the whole thing, as you know. But I think this is like the Neil Peart thing we were saying about lyric writing. It feels a bit like possibly he did write this first. I stand upon a spiral stair, the oracle, this sort of thing. It's almost like they're punching it out, these notes, like to the words he's written. I think it's really good, this, because it doesn't justify itself. It's right at the pinnacle of the track, isn't it? It completely is standalone. And then it just suddenly dies out at the end. I know what you mean. It's that stop-start thing. But there's exciting little nuggets. Each part of 2112 is so exciting in itself. I don't think you need a whole. You don't need to justify the whole.
But you've already conceded, have you not, that we're not really clear who the elder race of men are? It's not.
No, but we find out.
Do we? Oh, right.
Yeah, we find out in the Oracle. The Oracle tells us what happened to the last race of men. They left and they're sorting their lives out, and they're going to come back.
Because there was an intergalactic war.
Yeah, they're going to come and save us. This is the whole point. We have to know who these people are. Also, space is a really big theme for them, isn't it? They love space. I mean, it goes on to Cygnus X1 and all that stuff, doesn't it? They love talking about sci-fi stuff. It has to involve space. It couldn't just be a planet where there's a problem. There has to be some intergalactic thing going on, so everyone can wear kimonos like them.
Shaun, where do you stand on this?
Oracle, are we on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wrote bridging section.
Yeah.
That's really all I wrote. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's got to be there, but it's confronting the Oracle, isn't he? Who takes him on a trip into the future.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah, that's where we are in the story. But I don't have any strong opinions either way on this track, if I'm really honest.
Yeah. It's only short.
Yeah.
It's starting to it's starting to annoy me by this point that they just keep stopping and then going into another sort of strummy bit, and then they get, I think it's overly repetitive, and I think that actually it would have just worked if they'd taken this bit out and left that story on the shelf, as it were. But I take your point. It might be more important than I'm giving it credit for. I mean, let's go into Soliloquy, as it's called, part 6, right? I get back into it at this point. It's a bit in the way. I suppose it's a bit in the way like Supper's Ready by Genesis. I love the opening, and then they lose me at some point in it, and I think, oh, what's going on here? What are they doing? And then at a certain point, I think when Apocalypse in 9/8 comes in, I think, oh, right, we're back on track now. And I like it there until the end, So that I have the similar effect here. I think, as Peter was saying earlier, it's a similar sort of structure, actually. It's just episodic. But this, I think, works as a penultimate section. Because also it's got a sort of, again, to sort of echo Peter, Geddy sounds amazing
Yeah.
on this one. Um, and it takes us into, yeah, because he says, my life blood spills over, right? That's the
Mm,
end. That is great, that bit. And then when Alex Lifeson comes back and with the
mm,
grand finale,
mm.
as they very modestly. I think that's great, that bit. I'm sort of doing two tracks at once here. It's probably better to do them like that because they kind of part of a whole, aren't they? Peter, where do you
Yeah,
last bits?
we're back. The story. I mean, I love stories in rock, and I think this is great because he goes back. He's seen the Oracle. He knows that there's possible hope out there, but he actually it's a suicide, I think, isn't it? He actually kills himself. I'll tell you what, though, I don't know whether you get this. I assume I'm not the only person on earth who gets this, but there's certain points in music, usually in rock music, where I get goosebumps, and it happens every time I hear a certain track. And when he sings "Just Think of What My Life Might Be in a World Like I Have Seen," it never fails to catch me. That it's a really dramatic moment, and it's something to do with the explosion of sound. But Geddy Lee just sounds amazing on this. I just think his voice is just so affecting. I love it. And the guitar, Alex Lifeson's guitar on this as well, is beautifully done. Are we talking about the finale as well?
Yeah, stick it in there.
Yeah, so going into that, they needed a good riff here, didn't they?
Mm, mm,
That riff works well because it definitely sounds like we're heading towards the end. It's a bit like the end of Brain Salad Surgery, isn't it? They needed a big
mm,
sound at the end to sort of sum it all up. It's an odd finale though, this, isn't it? Because I just don't understand what's actually happened. Because you hear it says we have assumed control, and for
mm,
years assumed control. And I thought, does that mean that means like taken over without authority, doesn't it? Basically, but I always take that as we have taken control. So I
mm,
never, because it's a robot voice saying it, it's like a computer or something, isn't it? It's like who's taken control? Is it the computers who have said we have assumed control? Because they already had control. The priests already had
mm,
control. But assumed control sounds like it can't be the commoners because
mm,
they wouldn't be saying assumed, would they? So I do not understand the ending of this. I
mm.
don't understand who's won. I don't know whether you can throw
Yeah.
light on that.
I've written what the hell happens at the end. So
Is it the Solar Federation? Have they won?
That's the people who already rule.
Oh,
hmm.
oh
we
dear.
know we've got no further, have we, through this debate,
No,
understanding what was
no.
going on in this story. Um, sure. I mean, yeah, it's funny you should mention, actually, before we go, it's funny you should mention Goosebumps, because I always get goosebumps in this track as well. And that's you're right, it's an unusual thing, but
Mm.
I always get goosebumps when they say we have assumed control.
Oh.
So
Hmm.
maybe that's my as Shaun was sort of saying earlier, that's my sort of unconscious desire to be taken care of by an obscure master.
The local council.
Yeah, and yeah, that I mean, when Alex Lifeson's guitar comes in at the beginning, it actually sounds like Tommy, doesn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
That at that point. Shawnee, you like this ending?
Well, if I can just reference back to can't even say it, soliloquy.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know what I think about that. To me, it's a bit of an unsatisfactory ending because, it's like he just dies of despair, isn't it? It's a really
Yeah.
dismal sort of ending. I just don't know what I think of it really. It reminds me of the latest Star Wars films, and they bring back Luke Skywalker, don't they? And he just sort of like dies of boredom or something, doesn't he? It's just a shocking, let's have he is bloody Star Wars, isn't he? Mr. Star Wars. And
Yeah.
then, here we are. It's like, oh, my lifeblood spills out. Oh, I'm just gonna die, like that. I'm just, for God's sake, the good thing is it does go into that grand finale, and that is, is Tommy like it. it's exciting, and actually, if he's died and it's all over, then why is that riff so optimistic sounding? So you do
Yeah.
end on a positive, you
Yeah,
know,
that's the
sound.
other mystery, isn't it? Is what
Mm,
is this positivity? What's the point of what's the
mm,
jubilant nature of this? I don't
yeah,
understand. It's weird.
yeah.
But maybe this
And
is the. Sorry, Sean. Go
sorry,
ahead.
no, I was going to say, I don't think I've sort of bigged up Neil Peart enough. Actually, he's although Rush are on the sort of limit of my own personal taste because are they prog? Are they prog metal? What are they? But Neil Peart, plays some great uh, fills on this sort of outro, and he's one of the he's got to be up there, hasn't he? He's got to be in the top 10, top 5, top 3 rock drummers of all time. And I think he's the one drummer, like say someone like Phil Collins, that he's so sort of fluid, and you've got every confidence in him playing all of those drum fills as well. And he does seem to be actually in interviews, he does seem to be a really nice guy. And I know I've taken the mick earlier on, but I mean, he said if we're getting into politics, and he was hurt, wasn't he, by some of the criticism about the music press saying our Rush just a bunch of sort of little Hitlers basically, and that hurt them. And I think
Little.
he was probably Democrat, wasn't he? I think in later life he never really said, but I don't think he was a paid up member of the Nazi party or anything like that. So,
Bit late.
Is that why you
God
wrote a
bless him.
little? You drew a little Hitler in your book there because they were accused of being
He
little
he
Hitlers.
just happened to have the hair like it, and he had a moustache, but that wasn't Hitler,
Yeah. Well,
honestly.
The thing is,
yeah,
Neil Peart is that perfect combination, isn't he, of technique and and feel.
Yeah,
Like what you get with Phil Collins.
mm,
I think Phil Collins is in a
yeah,
way better, but I think Phil Collins had
yeah,
more of a chance to sound better actually. But I
yeah,
think that he just bridges that perfect gap, doesn't he?
yeah,
To
yeah. And he adapted his playing because he was quite. I mean, he said he liked all the usual suspects. He liked Moon and he liked Ginger Baker, John Bonham, etc. But he did adapt his playing. I think when he came over to England, he listened to a lot of the prog drummers, and he liked jazz and big band music as well. And he did. I think he played with the Buddy Rich orchestra. So he all drummers, don't they? Well, rock drummers who like they want to get that approval from the jazz world, don't they? Like Ginger Baker did it as well. And it's like, oh, I must be good then. Some old
yeah.
codger who played for Buddy Rich said I was good, so I must be good. As if he needed approval. But they do. They want that seal of approval, and
yeah.
you know,
I always think that Neil Peart sounds like Keith Moon uh, would have sounded if he could play the drums. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like
yes,
he's like
yeah,
Keith Moon but good.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and yeah,
Exciting feels.
I'm
Yeah.
glad that you've said all of that. We said we weren't
Mm,
going to discuss bands and members and stuff
mm,
like that. But band members, not members, band members. But I think that I feel a bit guilty about slagging his words
mm,
up earlier. He's not that bad a lyricist, but yeah, he's a brilliant drummer. He's one of the
mm,
it's one of these drummers that actually. I mean, I listened to some of the. I mean, this is the highest compliment I think you can pay a drummer. So
mm,
I actually specifically listened to some Rush songs just to hear his drumming,
mm,
right? Which is unusual, isn't it? I mean,
mm.
that you're in Ginger Baker territory there.
Yeah.
I mean, who would sit and listen to Toad, off Wheels of Fire live if it had been played by anyone other than Ginger Baker?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Totally.
so yeah, you're right. The drumming is amazing, and it gives a
Mm,
real um I don't know, it gives real oomph to this whole experience, doesn't it? The
yeah.
whole Rush experience. But they're all good.
Yeah.
That's why.
They
That's
are.
why.
They are.
When you say, Tim, oh, I'm not sure, about the structure of this, or maybe this could have been written better. The thing is with them is they're so good, aren't they? I mean, they're so good at playing. They sound so great, and then when you add Geddy Lee on top of that, the
Yeah.
vocals, it's kind of like they can play the simplest stuff, and it just sounds so exciting, doesn't it? I think that they can get away with quite a lot, actually. Well, apparently not, because Caress of Steel didn't work out very well. But I think at this point, this album could have gone a number of ways, but they just do it so well. They play
Yeah.
so well.
And I think it also in their defense, I take Sean's point earlier about they're not quite in my wheelhouse because what are they? Are they sort of more metal? And Sean's not a metaler. But I think one thing you could because I sort of sympathize with that a bit. I mean they're a bit of a funny band, Rush. They're not sort of, they haven't got perhaps the sort of sophistication of sound that some of the other prog bands that we would like, British bands specifically, have. But on the other hand, they were very consistent as a band. If you sort of buy into what they're doing and you sort of accept it as being like an interesting thing, then every album was really great. I mean, they've got an incredible body of work, going right up to the end of the 80s, really. I think almost every album they did was excellent, really. I think they go off a little bit after that, but so yeah. Well, look, great. Now we've been talking for a while. I think we've basically done that track. Maybe we could try to go a little bit more briskly in the second half, particularly given that I sense some ambivalence towards side two. I mean, this is where it goes a bit like exactly what you said earlier, Peter. This is like I start to miss Caress of Steel at this point because Bastille Day, I think I'm Going Bald, Lakeside Park. I think that they're even the Necromancer. I think they're really cool tracks, or there's really interesting and fun and funny, even like they just they're charming in a way that the tracks on the second side of this album I don't think are, even though one or two of them are all right. The other thing is I think that they're sort of seem to be playing paradigm tracks as if we need a track like this, we need a quiet track, we need a sort of funky track, like almost as if they're I don't know why they would be doing this at this point, but slightly repeating themselves almost self-consciously. But having said that, Passage to Bangkok is it's a track I like, and it's quite an unusual track for Rush, I think. So let's go into that. I mean, the time signature wrong foots me at the beginning, as I've talked about this before, where I hear a song and it starts in a weird time signature, and I think, and then when the drums come in, it's like, oh, that's the strong beat, right? So this is another one of those. But yeah, and I think also the middle bit I find a bit over mathematical, where the guitars and the bass seem to be playing in a different time signature to the drums.
Yeah.
It's very clever, but it's like clever without actually being that fun. But apart from that, I think this is a really nice sort of fun. And actually, sorry, I'm going on and on, but like this is where Neil Peart's lyrics actually work, I think, where he starts to do more sort of like descriptive stuff, where he's not trying to make a point about libertarianism or something or other, and it's just more sort of like he's just painting pictures. And I think that actually this works well at that point. I do have one sort of concern about this track, which is that is it slightly racist? I mean, it was a different time. It was a different time, but like that thing at the beginning where they go da, 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 da,
yeah, like, it's like Hong Kong Phooey.
Hong Kong Phooey, yeah. Peter, are you a fan of this track?
The thing, what I wish they'd only released one album, and that was Caress of Steel and 2112, and had 2112 and then taken all the singles from Caress of Steel and putting on the back of this album. God, it would have been better. I really wish those two things just be melded. I think you're absolutely right. I think they're trying to cover all the boxes here. Let's do one like this. Let's do one like that. God help us when we get to Tears. I mean, Christ. But anyway, I think the thing is with this is it was, I think, a weed travelogue was what I read online. It was like a kind of like, Smoker's Paradise list. It's a good enough track. I mean, I don't mind it, but the thing is a vinyl is you have to put the effort in, don't you, to actually turn this thing over and actually want to play this side, and so in a sense, I really wouldn't bother. What I don't know. It has a very tasteless Eastern riff in it. I don't think it's aged very well, this song.
No.
Sean?
No. Well, I mean, it may have made an amusing B-side is about the best I can sort of say. I mean, the
May.
The guitar riff. I mean, do they have Chinese sounding guitar riffs in Thailand? I don't know. I mean, it's a different country, isn't it, altogether, really? But anyway, um, I don't know. I
Point.
mean, yeah, he's writing about something that's real to them. Maybe taking a train ride around Thailand looking for drugs. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know. I think I'm up. My personal opinion is I'm more keen on him singing about, the Fountain of Lambeth. I don't want him to sing about the Fountain of Lambeth. Some sort of council-funded municipal drinking fountain. I don't want to know about that. So I don't want to know about where they get their drugs from. That's their business. Anyway, that's the best I can say.
I tell you what, if Rush were British, they never would have called that Fountain Lamb.
Oh dear.
Okay. Good. Twilight Zone. This is the weakest song on the album for me. This is like apparently I did read this is the last one that they wrote, and I think it shows, right? It's uninspired melodically, harmonically, and lyrically. It's like there's something about the lads, we need another 5-minute track. Oh, what are we going to write about? Oh, look, what's on the telly? Let's put the telly on. It's an episode of the Twilight Zone. Let's write about this. What's going on? Right, So yeah, this is not my favorite track. What do you think, Peter?
Well, I just think, it's about the television show and it's very specific, isn't it? But does have a melodic moment I quite like, which is the use the key, unlock the door. I think that's a nice little melody, actually, that bit. But it's the only bit that sticks out in there. It's a sort of weird guitar solo as well, isn't it? But it gets tiring. This is not the Rush we expect, is it? And you've got to get through side two. It's hard work. I don't really have time for it.
Yeah, well, it's not obligatory. You're right. You don't have to turn the record over, I suppose. But yeah.
Oh, okay.
Shaun?
Yeah, it's not a favourite of mine. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more about, what's on TV or the Twilight Zone. Let's write a song about it. It's a sort of novelty song. It would have made another good B-side, a throwaway track. I don't know. I mean, it might slightly reminds me a bit of, Little Nemo on And Then There Were Three, where he sort of says, "Oh, I look up to see a giant boy. You've just become his brand new toy." It sort of reminds me of those adventures of Nemo, that sort of quirky novelty style song. But
Scenes from a Night Dream.
that's it. That's it. Yeah. But that's much better than this.
That's the difference.
But yeah, I don't really like this very much, to be honest. Really.
This is going well, isn't it?
It sounds like if we'd worked for the record company, we would have sacked them after this record rather than one.
Now, going back to the taking the risk thing with this album, I mean, they took a massive risk with 2112 and the Temples of Syrinx, and then this is a sort of hedging your bet side, isn't it? Really, side two. It's like
the irony of it. This isn't hedging.
Yeah. So I don't know, but they didn't play any of this live, did they? Or am I wrong about that? Side two.
I can't remember.
They chucked it all out, I think, which said something, didn't it?
It is weird, isn't it, that they were worried. They thought their career was hanging in the balance, and so they decided to do a sort of like an alienatingly long track, whose story is unclear.
Yeah.
At best, and 5 sort of basically amount to B-sides.
Very good. Yeah.
However, and I say that with a sort of dramatic pause, the next track I quite like, Lessons. This is an Alex Lifeson one. It reminds me of Making Memories of Fly By Night. I mean, actually, it's the same mood. So it's obviously, I mean, I think it's a sort of slightly more Led Zeppelin-y. It sounds a bit like Ramble On to me.
Yes.
Led Zeppelin too.
Yeah.
And I mean, as I say, they seem to be rewriting tracks here. That's why I say it sounds like an earlier track. But I actually think this one sort of quite works. I quite like it. And yeah, I like the fact they've lop a beat off at the end of the post-chorus section. So like dun 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 dun, when they go back into it, they lop a beat off right at the end. That's very those are the sort of touches that you like. I like with Rush, that keep you. They're good at sort of like writing in a sort of refreshing way. I think sometimes because of that, it's a sort of technical thing, but I don't know. Peter, I keep going around in the circle, Peter and Shaun, but that's because it's like the way that the screens suggest themselves to me. Peter,
I'm at 2 o'clock kind of thing. No, I think this is unforgivably lazy, to be honest. When you say by Alex Lifeson, I think he wrote the words. I don't know whether the lyrics, but I think that this is just so lazy. The verse barely goes anywhere, and it's not imaginative. When you get to the chorus is worse than the verse. They expect the chorus to at least be uplifting, but it's not. This is when you realise that you're so glad 2112, the track, was on side one. Because you never would have got to 2112 at this rate if this is what you had to go through to get to it. I have no time for this track at all.
Very interesting that I mean, very interesting is pushing it, but I don't know if anything we've been talking about rises to the level of very interesting. But it's interesting that the short songs are on side one on Caress of Steel, as you were saying, when they've tucked them away. I mean, Shaun was saying this is like a B-side, but actually this is literally the B-side of the album.
Yeah.
So they obviously intuitively knew that they weren't as strong as the ones on Caress of Steel, or even though the record company apparently hated that one for some reason, and they loved this. But yeah, Shaun, you like this one?
Yeah, I do like this. It can stay on the album. The first thing I thought was this is, it reminds me of Ramble On, which is probably, I don't know, might be my favorite Led Zeppelin song. But yeah, I think it's chugs along. It's fairly it's positive sounding. I like the sound of the guitar, the feel of it. It's fine. I think it should stay on the album.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it sort of rescues. I don't know. I mean, I've been really rude about these songs on side two, but actually, I actually quite like Bangkok. What's it called? I forgot. Train to Bank.
A passage.
Passage to Bangkok. And then Twilight Zone really brings me down, and then Lessons actually makes the album pick up again a bit for me. Before the sort of like the low point that is Tears.
Is this when I do my Ken Dodd impression? No, I'm joking. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to. Another day, maybe. But Ken Dodd, I don't know if anyone in China knows, was famous for he was a comedian and famous for avoiding paying his tax. And he had some little puppets called Diddy Men, didn't he? And a tickling stick. Yeah, you had to be there to see it, really.
What's the point you're making, though?
I thought it was Tears by Ken Dodd.
Right.
I thought they'd covered it, but it's not, apparently.
What was his catchphrase?
How tickled I am.
How tickled I am.
Yeah.
You didn't put any feeling into that. It doesn't rise to the level of a Shaun impression, does it?
No, I'm still working on it.
I take it we're on to Tears now then. I think that this is not a great Rush track, this one. And I think it's strange that you were saying earlier, Shaun, because they got Hugh Syme to play the mellotron.
Hugh Syme, yeah. First use of a mellotron.
Is it jack of all trades?
Yeah, you want a bit of mellotron.
Can you fix the
plumbing fix?
Yes. Play a bit of mellotron, design the cover.
Yeah.
And I think I think even the band lose interest in this track by the end, because once they've done the sort of verse and chorus, couple of verses and chorus, then it just goes to it goes into a completely different key, and Mellotron just plays them out as if they've just gone. Can you just play the ending, and what do you want to play? Anything. And when you leave, don't forget to switch the lights off. Oh, and if you could have a look at the kettle, that'd be good on your way out.
And can you do the album cover as well? Yeah.
Yeah. What are your feelings on this, Peter?
Well, I love no. The thing is that this is so filler. I mean, filler tracks aren't supposed to be so obviously filler. This is terrible for them, I think. It's a real disappointment. I mean, just to play something, like Something for Nothing. I mean, that's, something like that. Just they could have written something better than this. I think what it is, it's a well-intentioned, because we know what they're like. They don't mean to be crap, do they? I mean, this is well-intentioned romance. The problem is it's so sickly, and it does not suit the audience who are listening to it. It's like they've forgotten who we are in this. And I just hate it. I've just written here, God help us. That was it.
It's very sort of maudlin, isn't it?
And you don't want to hear about Geddy Lee touching you.
Especially not when he's dressed like he is on the back of that cover.
No.
Yeah, in white satin.
Shaun, I think you've made your things clear.
Well, I tell you what, oh God, yeah, his lyrics on this are just shocking, aren't they? What would touch me deeper? Tears that fall from eyes that only I cry. It's so moving, isn't it? I tell you what it does. I'm being sarcastic, by the way. It reminds me a little bit. I've written down here Wind and Wuthering in the keyboard sounds, maybe the mellotron, and the guitar, slightly Steve Hackett sounding solo album.
Do you mean?
But I don't know if that's in a good way or a bad way. And I'm not going to say, but I just don't like this track. I think it's shockingly cheesy, and it should have been a B-side, really.
You know what? I had this conversation with someone recently, which was about penultimate tracks of albums, and I think this is a theme that runs through a lot of albums, which is it's like on the first Beatles album, that track, There's a Place. They fit it in, don't they? Just before the end. It's like, right, we've run out. Although I really like that song, and I think it's very indicative of what they were doing at the time. But you have that, and then you have this great ending, don't you? And it's like the last thing you can just fit in, just push it into that gap, and then you have a great ending, which is, I think, what's happening here. Tears has somehow made its way into this album, but it's absolutely in the darkest corner you could put it, really.
Because There's a Place is actually quite a good track, but I mean, what you're talking about really is like if you've got to tuck a track away, it's got to be the penultimate track on the album, isn't it?
Not the last one.
Not the last one. Oh no, God, no, definitely not the last one. You really have to put. I mean, it's interesting, this sort of like aesthetically and philosophically. You really have to end an album well, don't you? I mean, I know this is kind of an obvious thing to say, but I can't think of an album that I really love that doesn't end with a good track. You know what I mean? Because it's always incredibly you could almost get an album where all of it's rubbish, and if the last track's really good, I mean, like, this is going to be controversial, but like, I feel like that about Who's Next. I hate that album, except Won't Get Fooled Again, which I think is an absolute work of genius. And I almost will sit and listen to that whole album just so that I can listen to Won't Get Fooled Again. Although that does make me sound quite stupid. So
you know who do it quite well? I know this is like classic albums, but Oasis are quite good at that. Because what they tend to do is they write good songs, but there's so many albums of those that have an absolute cracker of an ending track. Like Slide Away, I always thought was an amazing ending to their first album. I thought, how did that end up like right at the back of the album? But I think that they do that quite a lot. They have a great ending track. I always think it's like drawing you on, isn't it? It's like, and that's where we're leaving you, and you better buy the next one.
Yeah, although that, to be strict that is. There's a coda after that, isn't
There
there?
is, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It's funny. This is an interesting. I could talk about this for hours, like the end.
This could be a podcast, couldn't it? Just ending tracks.
Yeah. All right. Well, so what about Something for Nothing then? Do we feel that this rises to the level of a good ending in spite of everything that's gone before, Peter?
Yeah, I think it does. This justifies what you've just been through, I think, really, which is this is good. It's basic, but it's like going back to like the first album or something, isn't it? It feels like they're back to kind of roots, like something they have not done on this album,
Mm.
and you suddenly have this memory of like what they used to be, Fly By Night kind of era.
Mm.
I say era, it's only a couple of years, but yeah, I think this is good, and I think it's a dramatic kind of verse, isn't it? In itself is interesting. It's one of those ones actually I find the verse more interesting than the chorus because the chorus is kind of all right, isn't it? It's sort of all right, it plods along, but the verses are actually quite well structured. I think melody's good.
Mm. Shaun, are you a fan?
No, no. To be honest, I just think I don't know. I think it's a pile of sort of hard rock twaddle, really. Um, I can't get beyond the sentiment of it. You don't get something for nothing. You can't have freedom for free. If you work hard, son, and you learn your instrument, you can be in a Canadian power prog rock trio. Just practice a bit harder. Get off your ass. Come on.
Is this
It's
is
like
this
that.
an
Oh,
is this
soft.
an accent? Are you doing an accent?
Yeah, that's exactly how Alex Leeson's dad talked. So it brings me down. I just think, oh, fuck off. Just start, write a song about the Fountain of Lambeth or whatever it is, go on a trip to Cygnus X1. I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear them preaching at me about, you've got to get off your ass and work. So that I can't get beyond it. Can't get beyond it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, yeah,
Sorry about that.
all right, Dad, leave me alone.
And
Uh,
I'm not, I find the
mm,
tune, I just find it boring, really. I don't think it's a good ending. That's my opinion.
mm.
What can I say?
If people are offended, they can write to Shaun via
Yeah,
post
just
card.
write to me, slag me off. Whatever, I don't care. Great
Yeah, I know what
band,
you
though.
mean.
Great band.
Because this is supposed to, yeah, you just said, no, no, great band. And I was talking over you. So it's too late now. Um,
Uh,
yeah, it's like I know what you mean. Because this is actually supposed to be thematically linked with the first track, isn't it? In the sense, so this is where they go political again. And this is where
mm,
you start to miss Geddy Lee talking about tears that fall from eyes because it's so politically uncomfortable to listen to, isn't it? I know what you mean. Yeah, it's a sort of like it's this sort of master chef ideology that we have to live with now, isn't it? Neoliberal ideology is like, oh, you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and stuff like that.
mm.
And if people think that, that's all right, whatever. I mean,
Of
I don't know,
course.
but whatever. But yeah, you don't want to hear it in your sort of I don't like the insinuation that you've got to listen to this from your favorite band. Also, once read an interview with them when they came over to England, to Britain. They were doing a British tour, late 70s, I suppose, after this album, or maybe after this album, or Farewell to Kings or something. I can't remember when they first went to Britain.
Mm.
And they were interviewed in the NME or something like that, or was it NME or something? Anyway, there was an
Melody Maker.
Melody, could have been Melody Maker, and they were slagging off the Wilson government.
Mm.
Okay. It made me think of you, Shaun, because I thought Shaun might be happy about this.
No, no. Anyone who slags Harold, that's it.
That's
They're
right.
off my Christmas card list.
That's right. So you'd be like, these bloody Canadians, coming over here,
Coming over here.
Guitar.
Anyway, well,
Ah,
this has been a lot of fun, and unless either of you've got anything else you want to add,
Well, I think what's happened in when you look at the history of Rush is that Fly By, well, the first album's just gone, but Fly By Night and Caress of Steel kind of have lost all impact, haven't they? Because 2112 is seen as the beginning of something, and you have to kind of discover those early albums, don't you? They're not obvious to you. And Moving Pictures and Farewell to Kings are known really well, but this kind of restarted the band, didn't it? I think, and it was you just lose the rest of that whole image and feel just gone.
Yeah. Did you say that it reached number 61 in England, in Britain?
I think so.
The UK or whatever it's called.
See, Farewell to Kings was the one that broke in Britain, wasn't it? And I'm much more familiar with that album. That's probably, like Tim, you said it was Hemispheres for you, wasn't it? It's probably Hemispheres. Well, they're a bit sort of linked, aren't they? Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres. So Steve is with Peter on Crest of Steel, I think.
Shout out to Steve.
Shout out to Steve. But yeah, I'm more comfortable with the proggy side of Rush. I think I'm less comfortable with subject matter.
Well,
I just think they're better. I just think they're far superior pair of albums. But obviously, the genesis of it was here, wasn't it?
So you're saying it was a nice pair. You were saying.
They're a smashing pair of prog.
I think that all I was going to say was that I thought 61 actually, even though that they might have gone higher afterwards, 61 in Britain is not bad for a sort of obscure, very weird, Canadian prog band who've only had 4 albums. I mean, we don't tend to listen to Canadian music very much in Britain, so really this is them on their way up, I think. And it's well remembered, isn't it? This album. Although judging by the conversation tonight, it's not entirely clear why. But great band though, Rush. Yeah, lovely.
Great band.
Lovely. Great band. Okay, so let's leave it there then, and we'll see you on the next episode, which will be, I suppose, in a couple of weeks, something like that, whenever we're next available. And thanks for joining us. Good night.
See you again. Bye bye.